Here you can see a nice drawing of a plant cell, and we're just gonna label it. Let's start off with the cell membrane over here in yellow. The cell membrane is important for controlling what goes into the cell and what goes out of the cell. And however, in contrast to prokaryotes, we're talking about a eukaryote over here, and there are many more membranes. Many more membranes can be found inside the cell as well. So we move on. The membrane surrounds the cytoplasm, which is the light blue part over here. The cytoplasm is the place where the chemical reactions of a cell occur. It is made mostly of water, but it contains countless minerals, enzymes, and substances. A eukaryote has a nucleus which contains the DNA, and the nucleus is made by so-called nuclear membranes. And you notice that it's a plural because there are two nuclear membranes surrounding the DNA, which can be found inside the nucleus, which actually should also be labeled. So in here you find the DNA, and this orange part here in the middle is referred to as the nucleolus. I might actually label this as well. Just because it's here, I think it's not so important, not as important as the other structures that you see. The Golgi body or Golgi apparatus can be easily identified because it looks like a stack of pancakes. And the function of that is it's the processing and packaging of proteins which the cell makes. There is going to be a separate video to explain this in more detail. Those little bubbles that you see are not bubbles, but these are vesicles. They are also surrounded by a membrane, just like the Golgi body. And over here we have the thick cell wall, which is colored green. A little bit misleading maybe, because the cell wall itself is not green. The thing that gives plants their green color, the chloroplasts, which are over here, which I did not label yet, but not the cell wall. And the function of the cell wall is to make sure that the cell does not burst because a plant cell is also under pressure. These little cell organelles over here are called mitochondria. They are important for cell respiration, and they essentially provide the cell with energy. Very large here in the middle, blue, colored blue, is the vacuole, and plant cells have a large central and permanent vacuole, and you can see that it actually fills the majority of the space inside the plant cell, and the vacuole essentially squeezes the other cell organelles towards the cell membrane and the cell wall. As I already mentioned, this cell organelle over here is known as the chloroplast, and it is the part of the plant which is responsible for photosynthesis. Over here, a slightly enlarged picture, because it was otherwise too difficult to label. And we have over here, surrounding the nuclear membranes, we have the so-called rough endoplasmic reticulum, also known as RER. It is called rough because of these black dots sitting on it, and these black dots are known as the ribosomes. And these ribosomes make it appear rough under the microscope. Endoplasmic means essentially nothing more than that it can be found inside the cytoplasm. Endo means inside, plasmic, plasma, the liquid of the cell. It can be found inside the cytoplasma, and a reticulum is a network. So it's a rough network which can be found inside the cytoplasm. and it is responsible for making proteins. Specifically, the ribosomes are responsible for that, but it also produces vesicles, which are used to transport the proteins around in the cell. There is going to be a separate video on that. You also have a so-called smooth endoplasmic reticulum, and the smooth endoplasmic reticulum also is responsible for a variety of tasks, among other things, the synthesis of lipids. And you see that there are two arrows here, or two lines, pointing to ribosomes, but these ribosomes over here are free ribosomes. They are floating around in the cytoplasm, and they produce proteins which are to stay inside the cell. While those ribosomes which can be found on the RER are responsible for making proteins which are then ultimately transported out of the cell. So, and this was almost it, because I might add a few more things here. The DNA, which can be found inside the nucleus. The nucleolus I already mentioned before, and some textbooks also refer to the inside of the nucleus as the nucleoplasm. I just want to mention this as well for the sake of completion. And that was basically it. When you are to draw a plant cell, then I would of course recommend that you draw a two-dimensional cross-section of the cell, simply because it is much easier to draw than the three-dimensional picture that I'm showing over here. On the other hand, the three-dimensional picture gives, I would say, a more complete impression on the complexity, relating to the complexity of a cell. In that sense, I prefer the three-dimensional drawings for labeling. Okay, that was basically an overview over a plant cell.